Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. On the chart here, we've got a winter weather advisory going for tonight and until about noon tomorrow for the eastern areas here, the Brooks Range and the North Slope, due to the southwest winds of 20-40 miles an hour, snow blowing, snow reducing visibilities at times in this area. And that's actually the heaviest or the worst areas will be, of course, through the passes there, and that could see another couple inches falling of snow later tonight and into tomorrow. Now the gold area up there, that's a blizzard watch that's out for the eastern stretch of the coastline up there. That starts Monday evening and goes through most of Tuesday, watching another system come down from the Arctic there. That'll probably kick those winds up, bring some more snow in, and could possibly reduce visibilities down to a quarter mile or less. Again, that would be late Monday night and Tuesday. Down here over the southeast coast, there's a high wind warning out that's currently out and will extend or last until early Tuesday there for the Douglas-Juneau area for winds that could gust as high as 70 miles per hour or more anytime from now until Tuesday and or into early Tuesday, at which point there could be a drop-off in the winds midday on Monday, but are expected to come back up once again later Monday and Monday night. Otherwise, on yesterday's satellite imagery, one system here, a lot of clouds and some showers over the panhandle that came through the interior on Friday. That was sliding down yesterday, while another disturbance back up in this area that had come down from the Arctic was slowly inching its way southward, bringing those storm force winds into the Gulf of Alaska. It's very cold air began to sweep into that area, clearing back here to the west, and of course the continued bands of moisture bringing the gusty winds and light snow at times on the Arctic coast. Higher pressure developing out here, keeping all this moisture back out to the west with that low southwest ischemia front stalled out coming out of the center. Today you can see a lot of that, some of that moisture actually got caught up. This is all high level stuff right through here, coming around and then dissipating. The main front stuck out in this area, but beginning to break through underneath there and advance eastward with the rain back toward Shemya and the central Aleutians. Again, just clouds in through here with pretty light winds this afternoon and on Alaska, and a little gusty, but conditions are dry over the Alaska Peninsula. Much colder winds here coming down from the north, up to 25 miles an hour over Bristol Bay this afternoon. And that, of course, temperatures down around 20 degrees with clouds back to the north here and some flurries over the interior. And you can see the spin in the cloud pattern up there off the Arctic coast. That brought down a couple of bands, one right through here bringing snow to that area, and the gusty winds that were still gusting up to 50 miles an hour earlier today there on the east side appear to be diminishing a little bit this afternoon. And but still all of the coastline and the North Slope seeing west-northwest winds 15 to 30, even 35 miles an hour with areas of snow right up into the Brooks Range areas. But clearing out here over the southeast coast is this low mostly pushing east-northeastward, but the gradient here, northeast winds kicking up, but keeping most of the showers out to the west here. And these clouds appear to be breaking up this afternoon on the run, but gusty winds again over 50 miles an hour in Valdez today and 45 miles an hour late this afternoon from the north there at Seward, and some gusty winds in the channeled areas here across the North Gulf Coast and southern Alaska. Even the Copper River Basin there, Volcano, northwest winds 20 knots with temperature about 5 degrees this afternoon. Had some light snow going on there in the Tanana Valley, but very light snow actually, or just flurries. Same thing at Bettles, and then the gusty winds and snow and blowing snow conditions there on the Arctic coast. It just flurries back out here to the west as that cold air coming around the top of that high there in the Russian Far East picks up some of that moisture here from the still open waters of the Bering Strait, Chukchi Sea areas, as well as the northeast Bering, and that making it quite cloudy there with the rain and gusty winds out here and staying out there to the west over the Aleutians. For tonight, areas of snow, Tanana Valley, light snow backed up along the Alaska Range there, south of the mountains, clear and continued gusty on those winds here along the North Gulf Coast. All the showers staying off the coast, either south of Prince William Sound or to the west of the Panhandle there. So it should be mostly clear, cold and windy, but lighter winds down to the south. And there still is a risk of some light snow showers for, say, Annette and Heidelberg, those areas during the night tonight there. But most of that system sliding on into British Columbia. High pressure again ridging down out of the Russian Far East here into across the southeast Bering Sea, Bristol Bay areas, holding this system back to the west, but the front waves on it kicking off to the south and southeast, but the main low center beginning to edge its way eastward. Here's another system dropping down there on the Arctic coast there, so don't look for much change in the weather that you've seen for the last day up there through tonight. Some moisture here beginning to get a little more organized or a little thicker here, and should spread some of those flurries inland. Same pattern up there over Kotzebue Sound back across the Chukchi Sea. Outlook for tomorrow, low pressure now in the interior, weak low pressure, but look for a band of snow through this area, through the central interior and the eastern areas, with again some snowy conditions continuing on the Arctic coast there. Another trough coming in from the northwest, keeping the pattern the same up in that area through tomorrow. Less wind here for Kodiak Island and still dry with sunny conditions back along the North Gulf Coast. Some of these showers could clip the Yakutat Cordova area at times, at any time, but anything farther inland, no chance at all. Should be mostly clear over Prince William Sound. Continued gusty winds through the channeled areas in the North Gulf Coast like the Copper River Delta, and still windy with most of the wind up here in the warning area there over the northern Panhandle, and the gradient much slacker down toward Dixon Entrance, so a lot less wind. And now some moisture reaching the eastern Aleutians, but it should be pretty light and intermittent and still in the chances area there for Dutch Harbor and Unalaska. Should stay fair over the Alaska Peninsula with a lot of sunshine here over Bristol Bay. Low clouds, fog, flurries, IFR conditions, Nunivak Island back up along the Yukon Delta coastline. And then taking a look at Tuesday, we'll see the system beginning to edge its way northeast now, as if eventually it wants to take a bite out of the North Gulf Coast, which could happen toward the middle and latter part of the week coming up here. Low pressure now right along the southwest coast, again originating back to the northwest. So looks kind of cloudy and occasionally snowy here for the southwest areas back into the northern Bering Sea. High pressure though, clear and cold temperatures over the interior, and then watching that low there up to the northeast, bringing that possibilities of the blizzard into the eastern Arctic coast. And again, winds could gust back up to 50 miles an hour again in that area. Look for snow showers, pretty numerous possibly there over the northern Panhandle. Now dry in the south, kind of a change in the pattern here, bringing those winds around, pulling milder air up over the colder air, so that usually leads to snow in those areas there, but dry back along the North Gulf Coast and less wind as well, with the gradient really slackening off now, or becoming less windy but still dry with cold temperatures. And this afternoon, temperatures are in the teens up here to the north at Skagway to around 30 in the south in the case of Ketchikan. 22 degrees at Yakutat, lower 20s Prince William Sound and Seward. Kodiak at 29, Homer down to 23, 19 this afternoon at Kenai, 16 in Palmer, 5 degrees at Gulkana, and a -1 at Northway. There were some flurries both at, as I mentioned, Fairbanks and Delta Junction. Temperatures a little above zero back in the more clear sky area. -22 at Eagle, same thing at Fort Yukon. These are all 4 p.m. temperatures. In fact, Chalkitzik and yeah, that area was down to 35 degrees below zero this morning. Enough clearing occurred there, and probably back down to that level tonight. -9 Arctic Village. Single numbers to mid-teens here back along the Arctic coast, warmest here from Point Lay down to Point Hope. And 12 degrees Kivalina, 19 degrees with 3 miles visibility in light snow at Kotzebue. About the same at Daring, 11 degrees there in Nome. 15 in McGrath, at 7 at Huslia, -6 at Ambler, 20 degrees King Salmon, 25 at Cape Newnham. 4 miles in light snow at Bethel with 22 degrees today, 35 at Cold Bay and a 33 at Port Hayden, 35 in St. Paul in the warm area, Central Aleutians, both Adak and Atka checking in with 45. Lows tonight, -20s again to mid-30s over the Yukon Flats here. So again, coldest in the east, and the wind drops off in the Copper River Basin. Temperatures will easily fall into near -20. Single numbers up along the Arctic coast. 12 there at Shishmaref. Lost a few numbers here, but you can tell it's warmer by the shading back to the southwest. And highs tomorrow, again, that same contrast from north or east-northeast to milder conditions back to the southwest. But you can see the 30-degree isotherm now somewhere between Macoriac and St. Paul, cutting down here into the Alaska Peninsula and then back up into the southern panhandle. Looking at that 4-degree, that's for White Pass, so there's some altitude with that number there. Otherwise, lower to mid-20s for the North Gulf Coast. 5 to 15 above here for south central Alaska, and lower 30s for Kodiak, 40s for the Aleutians. Flying weather, look for a marginal VFR here through the central interior, marginal VFR and IFR up along the Arctic coast, and a swath coming into the southwest coast here, mostly along the Yukon Delta, St. Lawrence Island. Good VFR through here, lots of IFR out over the Aleutians. Anaktuvuk looks marginal at times tomorrow. Same forecast for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill VFR. Could be still some low stuff here in the western entrance of mostly Merrill Pass, and on up toward Rainy as well. That same pattern, but generally looking VFR. Windy, possible marginal conditions right at the north entrance, otherwise VFR. Isabel, same pattern, maybe some IFR on the north side, and marginal on the north entrance of Mentasta, but Tanita should be wide open. Portage, another VFR day there, as well as for Chilkoot and White. Freezing levels at the surface, right near the Pribilofs now. Big change from last week, well down to the south of the Gulf of Alaska, and even south of Dixon Entrance, with 4,000 feet here, barely on the map anymore. For the icing threats, just a possibility of some up here of the trace to light amounts. If it occurs at all, this is where it will be. Maybe out here as well with that moisture coming out of Russia, and then better chances here out over the Aleutians. Upper level wind flow chart shows the trough still over the northeast Gulf, and then this one here dropping down from the Arctic. This should track southeast to about this position by Tuesday night, and another portion will begin to come back to the southwest there. And later on in the week, that could develop into a south to southwest flow into the North Gulf Coast. For the 9,000-foot wind flow, not too bad here, still about 20 knots, which is down from today there over the eastern Arctic coast. Northerlies at about 10 to 20 here. Really not too strong for a case having high pressure here over the southeast Bering, and lower pressure off into the east of the Panhandle there, but those southeasterlies with this storm, 25 to 40 knots over the Aleutians, and about the same at 3,000 feet with light winds, mostly from the north over the interior of Alaska. Turbulence-wise, light to moderate chop here due to mechanical turbulence, Kodiak Island, up along all the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle, and moderate stuff here in advance of that front in the Aleutians. When I return, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Jim Peranto. Today in the studio I have Tina Neal, who's a geologist at the Alaska Volcano Observatory, or AVO. And today Tina is going to familiarize us with the AVO and tell us why the AVO is so important to Alaska. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you, Jim.
First off, what is the AVO and who works there?
Okay. Well, the Alaska Volcano Observatory is a joint scientific program comprised of the U.S. Geological Survey, University of Alaska Fairbanks Geophysical Institute, and the Alaska Division of Geological and Geophysical Surveys. So it's a group effort, and our job is primarily to track the activity of active volcanoes in Alaska, and importantly, give warning when they are becoming restless or getting ready to erupt.
What are the primary objectives of the AVO, and how do you go about meeting those objectives?
The primary objectives are threefold. First is to track these active volcanoes and monitor their state of activity so that we can issue alerts and warnings when they become restless and look like they're threatening to erupt. Secondly, we try to assess the likely future eruptive scenarios at these volcanoes and what sorts of hazards and effects could be associated with these eruptions. And then thirdly, we spend a lot of our time conducting basic scientific research into the processes of volcanism, and this is important to understanding better how our planet works and also to improve our ability to forecast eruptions.
And you have equipment that monitors these volcanoes across the state?
We do.
Okay.
The primary means for tracking activity at volcanoes worldwide is the use of seismometers, or basically earthquake sensing devices. And so we have more than 120 of these devices spread out across the volcanic arc of Alaska. On each active volcano, we have a network of about 5 or 6 of these seismometers that ring the volcano. And it's those sensors that are constantly listening to the volcano, basically, to pick up earthquake or other ground vibration activity that could mean the volcano is restless.
Okay. Now, why is the AVO so important to the pilots and other Alaskans up here? As you know, we have a huge aviation community up here in Alaska, so it's got to be particularly important to them.
You're absolutely right. One of the primary reasons for AVO being here and for growing through the years as we have is that there is such a huge aviation component to life and commerce in Alaska. And the Alaskan type of volcanoes tend to be explosive. That means their eruptions often produce towering columns of ash that can rise 30, 40, 50, 60,000 feet into the sky in a matter of minutes and produce these ash clouds that drift many hundreds or thousands of miles downwind. So those become a severe hazard to aviation of all kinds, low altitude traffic as well as the high altitude jet traffic. So one of our main jobs is to work to get information about these eruptions quickly into the aviation communication stream so that pilots and aircraft can avoid areas of danger.
About, I don't know if this is correct or not, but about half the population in Alaska live near an active volcano. Is that right?
That's right. About half the state of Alaska's population is within 200 miles of an active volcano. Of course, that's here in south central Alaska and includes the valley and Anchorage and the Kenai Peninsula. We're just downwind directly of Mount Spur, Redoubt, Iliamna, Augustine, all the volcanoes close to us that have been historically active in one way or another and could produce eruptions that at least drop ash on the populated communities of South Central.
So it's important not only to pilots, but just people in general.
Sure. Even folks on the ground 100 miles away from a volcano need to be prepared and know what to do should there be ash coming out of the sky.
How many volcanoes do we have up here in Alaska?
I like to say we have 41 active volcanoes, and by active we mean volcanoes that have had either an eruption or some significant unrest, earthquake activity, or a large steam cloud production in the last 200 years, 250 years or so. That's our definition of active volcanoes.
Okay.
If you expand the time frame to look back at the last 10,000 years or so, the number may jump to 80 or 90 separate volcanic centers. So different geologists count the volcanoes slightly differently, but I think it's suffice it to say that Alaska is a very volcanically active region on the planet.
And why do we have so many volcanoes up here?
Well, it's a result of a planetary process that we call subduction, and this is one of the tenets of plate tectonic theory that's developed in the last quarter century in geological sciences. And subduction is a process whereby the outer rigid portions of the Earth's surface, which are broken up into about a dozen major plates, subduction occurs when these plates come together and meet, and one is actually forced downward below another. So you have an overriding plate and an underriding plate.
Okay.
And in Alaska setting, it's the North Pacific or the Pacific Plate, which is diving beneath mainland Alaska and the North American plate. As that downgoing material, which you can envision in your mind's eye just like a conveyor belt descending into the Earth's interior, reaches a depth of about 100 kilometers or 60 miles, the temperature and physical changes occur such that melting of the material in that region occurs. And the molten material that results is called magma and is lighter, less dense than the rocks around it, and it tends to rise to the surface of the Earth. And where that material punctures the surface of the Earth, you have a volcano. So along this subduction boundary where the two plates are meeting in Alaska, which basically parallels the Aleutian Arc, that's why we have this line of volcanoes. That same process of subduction and the two great plates meeting is also why we have such an earthquake active region here and why Alaska is so seismically busy.
And it's part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, right?
Exactly. It's the northern arc of the Pacific Ring of Fire.
So subduction's happening all across the Pacific?
Basically all around the Pacific Basin, exactly. It's responsible for the volcanoes of South America, Central America, Indonesia, Japan, and Kamchatka.
Okay. One more question. How does the AVO work with other government agencies?
It's a really important part of the warning process that the Alaska Volcano Observatory work closely with the National Weather Service, Federal Aviation Administration, and other agencies at the state and federal level to be able to distribute these warnings in a very timely and accurate fashion. So our job is to communicate immediately with FAA and Weather Service when we either see a volcano becoming restless or we are certain an eruption has occurred. And we try to give them as much data, hard facts about what's going on as possible, so they can translate that information into their formal notification stream of SIGMETs, NOTAMs, volcanic ash advisories, and other message formats that I'm sure the pilot community is very familiar with. So we work very closely with those groups, Anchorage Center and the Aviation Weather Unit and other people in town. We meet with them several times a year to make sure our communication lines are open. And in addition to that, the observatory puts out both an email and text fax message when we have a volcanic event of any kind. And this can go to the public and the media. It's also available on our webpage. So we try to get information out along a number of redundant pathways to make sure it's as disseminated as widely as possible.
Well, folks out there want to get more information about volcanoes. There's some useful websites out there. There's one that talks about volcano preparedness, another one about volcanic ash, I believe, and then there's one that is for the Anchorage Volcanic Ash Advisory Center, which is part of the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit. And that might be some useful information to people out there. Of course, they can always contact you, Tina. You work right here in Anchorage.
Absolutely. We have an office up on the APU campus in Gould Hall, and we're always delighted to receive visitors, especially folks from the aviation community, because pilots are really our eyes in the sky many times. And I've been here for 14 years, and on many occasions, in the old days especially, the first indication of an eruption actually came from a pilot who saw it from the air. So we really appreciate that relationship and welcome visits or calls at any time.
Well, that's great. Boy, a lot of great information today. Thank you for coming in.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Gusts all through these areas, again with the highest velocities up there in the north. About the same pattern here, but more northeasterly along the coast, and then diminishing and a little more northwest down along the southwest coast. Something of a change on Tuesday here with southwest winds maybe picking up to 25 knots there along the south coast and becoming southeast over the inside waters, but still north to northeast, 20 to 25, even 30 knots with much higher gusts out of the channeled areas, and no change up here in the north. Kodiak Island area, 20 to maybe 22 knots, definitely lighter winds here, and still can see 25 to 35 knot winds from Kamishak Bay across the Barren Islands. Otherwise, northerlies 15 to 20 knots along Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, but still pretty gusty here in the Seward area, although probably not as high on those peak winds. For Tuesday, lighter winds yet, but still northwest, just 15 knots here for Kodiak Island. Northwest 20 to 30 knots now, so lose the gales, and 20 knots for the remainder of the coast, 10 to 15 for Cook Inlet. Bristol Bay, northeast at 10 tomorrow, northeast 20 for the peninsula, and north to northeast winds at about 15 Kodiak Island on down to Cape Sarachev. Then on Tuesday, really light winds, 5 knots, 5 to 10 knots for Bristol Bay, north 10 for the water southwest of Kodiak, and 15 to 20 knot winds for the peninsula with the strongest winds or the highest speeds here on the southern side. For the Aleutian, small craft advisories just about everywhere tomorrow, northeast here in the west to east in the central areas, and then becoming southeast across the Fox Islands, and then those will swing around to the east here for the Fox Islands in the 20 to 25 knot range. Small craft advisories out to the west, but lighter now towards Shemya. For the Bering Sea, pretty light variable winds tomorrow, kind of a westerly breeze here, taking a turn to the northwest across Nunivak Island. Northeast winds for the Pribilofs at 15. And then look for a pickup in the winds back up to small craft advisories for St. Lawrence Island, but pretty light for the Pribilofs from the north, and easterlies at 15 or 10 to 15 for the northern Bering Sea. Up along the Arctic coast, westerly winds still strongest here over on the east side, but diminishing back to just 15 knots on the central coast. Pretty light northeasterlies here along the west side and all the way down to the Bering Strait. Then for Tuesday, not much change northeast, but remaining rather light here at about 15, all the way up north 15 for the central coast. And then again, that next system coming down out of the Arctic could kick those winds back up at least to 30 knots, maybe even higher than that on the eastern stretch again throughout the day on Tuesday. For tonight, this low will keep it breezy and snowy with areas of blowing snow along the coast, as well as the areas of the eastern North Slope up into the north slopes of the Brooks Range, where gusts can be as high as 40 miles an hour. So there's a winter weather advisory out there. And then areas of snow, flurries, and fog, less wind in toward Kotzebue Sound. Still pretty gusty on the winds here along the North Gulf Coast areas. And at least this evening through portions of the Copper River Basin. High wind warning there for the Juneau area tonight and into tomorrow, and actually into Tuesday there, but you can see a few less lines over the southern areas, so that means less wind. This low pressure area should bring a chance of some moisture east into the Fox Islands, but just a chance there, no change. Dry, light winds, Bristol Bay, less wind for Kodiak Island, and even these winds will be in a downward trend along the North Gulf Coast tomorrow, even though this low remains in the Gulf of Alaska. A swath of snow, light snow through the interior, and then some more stuff about to smack down on the Arctic coast, especially Tuesday here on the...
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.